Welcome to another edition of the Giants Huddle podcast brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. I am John Schmelk. Last week, we took a look at all the assistant coaches the Giants brought over from the Baltimore Ravens. Today, we're going to focus in on some of the Giants coordinators that they brought in. Well, two of them, and then one other high-level assistant. So we're going to have Matt Derrick from the Chiefs. He's going to talk about Matt Nagy. And then we're going to have a Titans guest, and he's going to talk about Dennard Wilson, the Giants defensive coordinator, and Brian Callahan, who they brought in to be on the offensive staff. And now we begin our look at the Giants coordinators with Matt Derrick, who is the Chiefs beat writer for Chiefs Digest. Matt, good to talk to you again, my friend. How are you?
I am doing well. Good to catch up with you as well, John.
Absolutely. All right. So the Giants have hired Matt Nagy as their offensive coordinator. And he's one of these offensive coordinators that is a coordinator but doesn't call plays. So why don't we start here? He's had two stints with the Chiefs, right? Was his role any different in his first stint versus his second stint, and what were those roles?
Yeah, it certainly seemed like his role was a little bit different the second time around. And, and you talk about calling plays, the first time around, yeah, I mean, largely Andy Reid was calling the plays. In the second stint, there was a little bit more control that Matt Nagy had. And one of the things that, the Chiefs really do is they're very organized. And that's one thing that Matt Nagy did as well. I mean, this is an offense that they knew what they were going to be doing going into the game. So, this is not a fly by the seat of your pants. This is a scripted offense that Matt Nagy runs. And Andy Reid runs, and Matt does this exact same thing. So you're going to have the scripted plays, but they know what they're going to run in each situation going into Sunday. They've gone through every scenario, so it's a very structured offense, and Matt does the kind of the same thing that Andy Reid wants to do.
So let's start there. Is this one of those deals where the first 10 to 12 plays of the game are in fact very scripted?
Yeah, and if you've ever watched the Chiefs game and you've seen the play sheet that Andy Reid and Matt Nagy have, it's very organized. So yeah, they're going to have the first 15, 20 plays scripted. Those are going to generally be first and second down plays. But then they've got that play sheet divided into every other scenario that you can possibly imagine. So, you've got your third down plays, you've got your fourth and shorts, you've got second and longs, everything that's on their 4-minute offense, everything, even down to, what you're going to run on each hash. And that's one thing that Matt likes to do is have meetings with the quarterback and we're doing that with Jackson Dart on Fridays and Saturdays after the run through to go through and make sure, hey, your quarterback knows everything that they're going to run in every scenario. So there's not surprises, and everybody knows what they're going to do in each scenario.
Now, my understanding is that Andy and Matt are super tight, right? And they really put these game plans together as a pair. And, even going back when maybe Eric Bieniemy was there, what his involvement was. Talk to me a little about how that relationship worked and how they worked together to put the game plan together each week.
Yeah, it was a really collaborative process that they ran here. And, everybody has a little bit of a voice, so it's not just Andy Reid calling, putting together the game plan, wasn't Matt Nagy. They had a lot of people involved. So your passing game coordinator, a guy like Joe Blameyer is involved. Andy Heck's got a voice. Todd Pinkstone was running backs coach. Everybody's got a voice, and they're part of the offense and what they want. And so, there's usually about a half dozen coaches that are involved as far as just putting the game plan together. And yeah, Andy Reid, as he would always say, has 51% control.
Yeah.
I imagine Matt Nagy's going to have the same kind of philosophy with the offense there as well. But it's very collaborative. Everybody's got a voice. And I think that's interesting when you look at the staff that Matt Nagy's put together in New York as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I think how he works with Greg Roman, well, obviously he's had a lot of success in the run game, how he works with Brian Callahan, former offensive coordinator, kind of from that McVay system, right? Being, the offensive coordinator for the Bengals. And I'm curious what that might look like. So when you talk about this collaborative effort, you have different guys that come from different philosophies. How do you see Matt kind of working with those guys to put this all together?
Yeah, I'm really intrigued about that because, and Matt Nagy was, I guess, quarterback's coach in 2013 when Andy Reid arrived in Kansas City and with Alex Smith. And one of the things, that Andy Reid did, in addition to putting together an eclectic staff, he had Brad Childress there at that time, Doug Peterson, brought in Chris Alt, who, was a longtime coach at Nevada that, really developed a pistol offense and brought him in just to pick his brain and to learn things that they could put in for Alex Smith. And that's what I see in this staff that Matt's put together in New York. One, there's no egos. Matt's not afraid to have, other alpha coaches around. He feels like he can work with them. So, the fact that he's got so many guys who have been head coaches, either in the NFL or in the college level, I think is really interesting. I mean, because once again, there's no egos. You check him at the door. And he's, accustomed and been in situations where they've brought in coaches that have expertise, and then he melds that into what he does and adds it in. So I think it's really interesting, the eclectic nature of the staff, but the experience as well. He's going to draw on that, and he has a really, like I said, a collaborative process that I think that group should get together pretty well, and I think they're gonna be able to put together some interesting ideas.
Now, I've read that when he was in Chicago as a head coach, he did this. I'm curious what your experience was with him in Kansas City. How much does he go to the players, see what they like to do, see what they want, take input from them in terms of putting together his game plan each week?
Oh, 100%. And it's not just a quarterback, it's everybody. I mean, he will definitely go to players and ask them what they like. He will take feedback. That's one thing that's obviously happened in Kansas City when you've got guys like Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. They're going to come up with their own ideas. And there are plays that, that the players have come up with and gone to the coaches with. And at the same time, even though he gives them that freedom and that has that ability to do that, they've got to work at it. So it's not just like, even with Patrick Mahomes, he can't come to Matt Nagy and just say, "Hey, we got this play. Let's go for it." They may put it in, they may practice it, but they're not going to run it until they've got it 100% down. And that's one of the things that, he'll listen to the players, and that's why I talk about those Friday and Saturday meetings as well with his quarterback. He will sit down with Jackson Dart and say, "Hey, what do you feel comfortable with this week? What did you like? What did you run? What worked in practice? What didn't?" Doesn't want his quarterback running in his offense running anything that they're not comfortable with that week.
All right, let's talk offensive philosophy because I think it's hard to separate, right? Like, what's Andy Reid? What's Matt Nagy? What does Matt really believe in? What are his core beliefs when it comes to putting an offense together? So, if you were to kind of thumbnail or summarize what his offensive philosophy is, how would you do that?
Yeah, it's a really good question because you're right. It is a little bit hard to separate and what is Andy Reid and what's Matt Nagy in Kansas City. So I look a lot at what he did in Chicago, and that's where I think you get the separation from Andy Reid. Andy's gonna has his offense, and he's gonna want to find players that he can plug into that offense. He may tweak it a little bit based on their skill set, but he's running a West Coast offense. It's what they're going to do. Matt he's a West Coast disciple. There's no doubt about that. But I think he is much more willing and able to adjust his offensive scheme and what he does to the talent that he has. And, you look at what they were able to do in Chicago. I still think his performance with the Bears is completely underrated with what he was able to do with Mitch Trubisky in that offense. He won games with a quarterback that, hey, Mike Tomlin didn't win games with Mitch Trubisky. I mean, he's been around in other places, so I think that aged really, really well. But what you kind of learn from that is that he will lean into the strengths of the offense. So if, hey, you've got a ground game there in New York that is really impressive, he will lean into that. It's not going to be that you're going to get away from running the football. Matt Nagy will run it if he feels like that's his strength. So, and that's why, again, I circle back to that offensive staff that he's put together because he's going to draw from every one of those elements. So I don't know that I can really tell you what type of offense he's going to run in New York because he's going to adapt it based on the strengths of his players, the skills that they have, and obviously the ideas that he's drawing from that staff.
Now, I will say the couple things was I looked at his Chicago stuff too, Matt, and I think when I looked at it, the one thing that was consistent from KC to Chicago, a lot of shotgun, right? Is it fair to say that his offense does revolve much more the gun and maybe more of an RPO style than it does a traditional under center, play action deep drop type of style?
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, Matt does like to throw the football, and he does like to throw it out of shotgun. That's been, one of the criticisms maybe of the Chiefs offense the last few years is that they don't go under center enough. And, it'd be interesting to see if he adapts a little bit, kind of as the changing times in the NFL. One of the things obviously he likes about the shotgun, especially with a young quarterback, is he likes the fact that it gives him an ability to see the defense a little bit easier and adapts a little bit. But you're right. I mean, and one of the things that he talked about in Kansas City that I thought was interesting is that because they throw the football so often and they put so much pressure on the quarterback that every once in a while you have like breather runs where you just are going to hand off the football. It'll be interesting to see because it with Mahomes, obviously they put the game in his hands. They let him have a lot of those decisions. I wonder with the younger quarterback, if he may back off a little bit on the RPOs because he just wants to put a little bit less stress on a younger quarterback and a less experienced quarterback. But as Dart gets more comfortable and everything, I think you'll see him add more and more of those elements and let the quarterback kind of show his personality and do what he does best.
Wait, so you're telling me with Patrick Mahomes, you actually do want to throw the ball more? Really? I mean, shocking. I know. Can't, can't blame him.
Huddle up, get in here. If you're lined up here, you gotta go over the middle with it to score.
Right. How do we make that happen?
I don't know, but Citizens does.
Make sense of your money with Citizens, official bank of Eli Manning.
Where have you seen the Chiefs offense be able to adjust as teams have adjusted back to them? I mean, I remember back when the Chiefs had the big play offense, right? When Tyreek Hill was still there, everyone started putting a shell over the top, and then they just went to the short passing game. Where have you seen, and again, it's hard to see where Matt's influence is on this, the Chiefs make some of those adjustments as teams have begun to change what they do against the Chiefs based on what they've been able to do in the past?
Yeah, I think you mentioned you really hit on it right there, which is one of the adjustments that Mahomes had to make. And and he had started to make these adjustments when Matt came back the second time, but I think he was really instrumental in helping Mahomes do that because it was really after that Cincinnati loss in the AFC Championship game that defenses really started, kind of trying to take away the back end of the field. You didn't have Tyreek Hill anymore. So the Chiefs offense had to evolve. And hey, Patrick Mahomes is a gunslinger. His mentality is to push the ball down the field. And, Matt had to kind of, I don't want to say that you was rein him in, but really kind of help Mahomes adjust to the fact that, hey, sometimes you just have to take what's there. You can't be the gunslinger all the time because if it's not there, it's not there. You have to adjust. And, I think that was hard for Mahomes, but I think Nagy absolutely helped him in that. And, and one of the things that I know that Patrick really likes about Matt is just his calm, his demeanor, that he's never, run around with his head cut off. I mean, even in the worst scenarios, I mean, Matt Nagy keeps his calm. And I think you've seen that over the years in the Chiefs offense that reflects on that. Matt Nagy offense, if they're down by 21 points, they don't freak out. I mean, they're always, gonna keep their heads in the game, and you're never feel like you're out of a game when obviously Mahomes helps, but I think having a coach like Matt Nagy helps in those situations too.
So I got to imagine then, in terms of the passing game, and I'll get to the run game in a second, a lot of crossers, right? A lot of shallow stuff, some short, quick hitters, right? Some West Coast stuff, some timing stuff. So, try to spread the field horizontally. Any other facets of this pass game that you think Giant fans should be prepared for as Matt Nagy takes the reins here?
Well, I mean, he is a West Coast disciple. So, I mean, the offense, he will want it to run to the tight end. That is absolutely a key piece. So, that's going to have to be a focus on the offense is just developing that. And, not that your receivers aren't a big part of it. I mean, you look at what the Chiefs, obviously did with their receivers as well. And, Tyreek Hill had big seasons in Kansas City. But, it wasn't just that Travis Kelce's a future Hall of Famer. It's that's the focus of the offense, whether it's the first read or it's the emergency read, that's the position that the quarterback in Matt Nagy's offense leans on at all times. So, that's one of the focuses that you're absolutely going to see is that there's going to be more emphasis on the tight end with Matt Nagy than you probably have seen before.
All right, and then how about the run game? Are we looking at a lot of zone runs, inside zone, outside zone? Have they put more gap scheme stuff in as teams have gotten smaller? And again, he's going to be doing this in conjunction with the other members of the Giants coaching staff. But what has this Chiefs run game look like? And I know the success maybe hasn't been what Chief fans have wanted over the last couple of years, but what does it look like from a schematics perspective?
Yeah, that'll be really interesting to me because again, you talk about Matt and his, tendency to adapt to the talent that he has and the skill set of the roster that he has. The Chiefs' offensive line, I mean, they've been going multiple in really the last 3 or 4 years, and that was a little bit of the structure of the offensive line itself, a little bit about their backfield and the type of runners that they've had. Once upon a time, the Chiefs, 10 years ago, were really a heavy outside zone run team. And now they've adapted a little bit and they've been a little bit more inside zone. They do go gap every once in a while. They do go man every once in a while. I'll be interested to see if, Matt goes a little bit away from that and really either favors, going with zone, either going with man, and going with one philosophy rather than trying to be multiple, because I do think that's been kind of a drawback at this Chiefs offense. They've tried to be a little bit of everything in the run game, and as a result, it hasn't worked out really well. But in New York, you've got a running back that I think you could really build around and focus on. And so I think that's an ability also, for the run game, is that if you can make that into a force, it's just going to make life easier for throwing the football and make it easier for your quarterback.
Personality-wise, what should Giant fans expect from him?
Matt's kind of a reserved demeanor. I mean, he's not like super outgoing and demonstrative or anything, but he's straightforward. He's funny. I mean, he'll make some jokes from time to time. And like I said, I mean, the one thing you always get from him is honesty. Hey, every once in a while, sure. Is he going to give you coach speak to protect his players? All those things, sure. But I think you'll find that he is pretty detailed as far as the answers that he will give. He will go into depth on things. And be really straightforward. So I've always thought that, Matt is one of those coaches that when he's in a press conference, I feel like I always learn something. He's a really smart guy, and he's patient as well. I mean, I never see him flustered. So even when things aren't going well, he seems to keep his head about him.
Matt, anything we didn't cover that you think Giant fans need to know about the guy they've brought in to be their next offensive coordinator?
Like I said, I think he's a really personable guy, and I think that's one of the things that he will win people over. I get it. When things aren't going well, it's probably going to be a little bit of a challenge because he is going to protect his guys, but he's really a first-class individual. I remember I hadn't covered the team a whole lot, very long before he left, because I think I only covered for the team for 2 years. Before he left for Chicago, and his first training camp, he saw me and came over and remembered my name and introduced reintroduced himself and asked how I was doing. That's who Matt Nagy is. He does that with everybody. He's a family guy, really nice guy. So I think fans will like him.
Matt, I appreciate the time, my friend. Tell the folks where they can find all your great work covering the Chiefs.
You can go to chiefsdigest.com, and from there you can find our YouTube channel, stories, and everything else you need to know.
Matt, I appreciate the time, man. Enjoy your offseason, as short as it might be.
Hey, you as well. Take care, my friend.
My buddy who works for the Titans, the team site, Jim Wyatt. Jim, it's good to talk to you, man. How are you?
John, I hope you're doing well. Appreciate you having me on. I'm hanging in there. It's been a busy off season with a new head coach here and a new staff coming together. Been at some league events that kept me out of pocket for a while. Caught the flu A, which was no fun. First time I got the flu in a long time, and it knocked me out. So I'm on the comeback though, getting ready for the combine and starting turn my attention toward these draft prospects.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing that there, Jim. We can catch up a little bit. There's been a lot of cross-pollination between the Giants and the Titans, between Shane Bowen coming here, now Brian Daboll's with you guys. We get, Dennard Wilson coming over, so Brian Callahan, a lot to talk about here. So let's start with the defensive side of the ball first with Dennard Wilson. Give me a feel. Give me like your thumbnail 20,000-foot view of what he is as a defensive coordinator.
Well, he's a motivational leader, a guy that is a player that is a coach that players have proven they are willing to fight for, willing to play for. Dennard Wilson arrived here in a pretty tough situation, starting off first-year coordinator and on a team that certainly needed some more pieces. He knew that coming in, and then especially this past year, really tough on him because they made several trades during the course of the year. Some guys got hurt where he was dealing with a depleted group. You know, Roger McCreary got traded here to, out to Los Angeles. L'Jarius Sneed got hurt and went on injured reserve. Draymond Jones, their edge rusher, got traded from here to the Ravens. And, it was really just a depleted group all the way around. And Dennard's defense kept fighting, kept playing no matter who was out there. So he gets guys to buy into what he's preaching. He's smart. He's great with the media. There were several times during the course of his rookie year here that I thought, man, this guy sounds like a head coach. And I still think at one point this guy's going to be a head coach in the National Football League. He just needs to get somewhere and have some success, and I think more people will notice.
All right, I'll get to the schematics in a second. You mentioned motivational guy. Is he like one of these high energy, pump guys up, defensive coordinator personality wise? Is he more of a technical guy? What's his approach? Is he a player's coach? Is he more of a disciplinarian? What's his kind of approach in terms of how he tries to coach his unit up?
Yeah, I mean, he's not a guy that I notice yelling and screaming because he doesn't like to bring attention to himself, and he certainly doesn't like to call guys out publicly. But he is just he's really savvy in how he motivates players, and I think they trust him. I think he knows they've got his best interest in mind. I've seen some coaches that do a lot of yelling and screaming, and that's not something that Dennard is. But he gets guys to play hard, and guys respect him. And if something needs to be said, I think he does it privately, and I think guys respect that.
Yeah, no question about it. All right, now let's get to the schematics a little bit here, Jim, because I went back and I watched a lot of his stuff. In terms of blitzing, he coached under Todd Bowles. He coached under Greg Williams. So you probably think this guy's bringing heat all the time, 60% pressure rate. He's firing blitzes all over the place. Didn't really see that with Tennessee, though, over the last 2 years once he got the reins. Do you think that's just because of what he had going on in the secondary and up front? He just didn't fit the talent? Or do you think he is maybe less aggressive than maybe some of his mentors might be?
Well, I think some of it, John, I think you're right, is that personnel. You got to know the personnel you're working with, and you don't want to put guys in a tough spot by having them, cover people one-on-one and be on an island and getting exposed. So I think that's a big part of it. I think certainly if he had a group that was maybe better equipped to deal with some of that, maybe you'd see him turn it loose a little bit more. So I think that's part of it. Part of it, we got a couple of big guys up front here, and Jeffrey Simmons and Tavondre Sweat, who were capable of kind of disrupting things, moving the pocket without having to send extra blitzers. But obviously, you want to keep opponents guessing, keep the other opposing team guessing. They did a great job generating pressure, even on times when they didn't blitz this past season. But part of me thinks, he'd love to come after him a little bit more.
That makes sense. Going from year to 1 to year two, the one thing that was consistent, played a ton of quarters, and just watching it, start with two safeties deep, and then you kind of like shift into whatever you're going to do, right? But I think I saw, if I remember right, when I had my numbers in front of me, Jim, a lot more man-to-man in year one, and then year two, he kind of pulled back on that a little bit. What kind of evolution did you see in terms of the type of coverages he used from year one to year two?
Yeah, I think that's safe to say. Part of that, again, though, I think is maybe you play a little bit more zone when you're dealing with a depleted young secondary, and that's exactly what they had dealing with. Like some of the changes they had during the course of the year, it was just staggering just to see how many new guys that they're either claiming off waivers or signing off of other teams' practice squads, and just kind of throwing them into the mix. And so you want to protect those guys to some degree, and I think that forced them maybe to playing a lot more zone than what they're used to. They had some young guys back there as well. I think in a perfect world, certainly he he's even more aggressive with the right personnel, maybe playing some more man, but a lot of that's going to depend on just what things look like from a personnel standpoint.
Yeah, and I guess this relates to the same type of question, right? Because he coached under Mike McDonald when he was in Baltimore, and you watch the Seahawks, the type of disguises they use in the back end, showing one thing then playing another. It's got to be hard to do that in Tennessee when you got a bunch of young guys, and to your point, guys you're picking up the scrap heap, guys you're claiming off waivers that haven't been there a long time. Did you really think he could have been limited in those types of things because it would have just been too complicated for the group that you guys happen to have out there because of injuries, the youth, et cetera, et cetera?
I do, yeah, and I think one thing about Dennard is he didn't make excuses. Like there were clear occasions when guys had made a mistake or had blown the coverage, and he didn't want to single guys out. I mean, he would try to maybe blame himself when he shouldn't have, which I think deserves a lot of credit. I mean, I think of any, of the coordinators, he had to deal with the most change, the most injuries, the most, hey, we're going to trade this guy to try to get assets moving forward. I'm sorry that it affects the product on the field, but you got to deal with it. I think he had to deal with that more than anybody, but he just kept doing his job. And, I think there were a lot of people going back to him being potentially a head coach one day. I think there were a lot of people when the Titans made a coaching change last year and went away from Brian Callahan and they had Mike McCoy step in as the interim coach. I think there were a lot of people that thought that Dennard maybe could have been the interim head coach. And I think he would have done a great job from that standpoint, but he didn't complain. He didn't mope. He just kept working, and I have certainly a lot of respect for him, just how he handles his business and how he holds guys accountable without throwing them under the bus.
Last one on Wilson, Jim. Any position or player or group on that defense that you saw based on how he coached his scheme that he was able to kind of elevate that group and they performed even better than maybe you would have thought they did heading into the year?
Yeah, and it's hard sometimes it's hard to know whether it's the player or the coach, but like somebody like Jeffrey Simmons, who last year, and again, Jeffrey Simmons deserves a lot of credit for losing weight and for focusing in the offseason to turn himself into a better player. But Jeffrey Simmons had his best year as a pro, I think, this past year, which was his second year into Dennard Wilson. And I think a lot of that's because of some things Dennard did to help free him up a little bit. But that was one part, and that's one position I'm certainly going to name. I think, I like the inside backers. I know we may talk about Frank Bush, but Cedric Gray is a guy who really developed well in his first full year playing with Dennard Wilson last year too.
All right, tell me about Frank Bush. That's where I was going next, Jim. So What does he bring as a linebacker coach? What kind of guy is he? And just give me a little thumbnail on him.
Yeah, great guy. Like he's had 2 stints here with this organization and as linebackers coach, and just a hardcore football coach, and another guy that holds people accountable. Frank shows up for practice a lot of days wearing cleats, just like the players. And,
nice.
That's he's an old school coach, and I don't think there's a player on the defense that got better from one year to the next than more than Cedric Gray did last year. Cedric was a draft pick. He was a 4th round pick of the Titans in the 2024 draft out of North Carolina. And his first year, he dealt with some injuries, really kind of a learning year for him. I think a lot of people, I don't want to say people questioned him, but certainly there were some question marks about him heading into this past year because of a rookie year that didn't live up to expectations. And Frank worked with Cedric and pushed Cedric, and Cedric ended up leading this team in tackles and really bought into what they were preaching. It wasn't just Cedric Gray, it was James Williams, it was Cody Barton, who I think got better as the year went on. I think all the guys under Frank Bush got better as the season went on last year, and I think that's a testament to him.
If you want to know how to manage 2 minutes of crunch time football, I'm your man. But if you're wondering about a long-term financial plan, you should talk to Citizens. Hey, I can also talk lawn care.
I'd like to learn about a mowing routine.
Yes, I knew I could help.
Make sense of your money with Citizens.
Giants Huddle Podcast is brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. From game day celebrations to your everyday financial needs, Big Blue fans get the most out of every moment with Citizens. Learn more at citizensbank.com/Giants. How many linebackers do we usually see on the field? Is Wilson and Bush? We're going to see a lot of base defense, a lot of 2-3-4. Are they in nickel most of the time, Jim? How do they kind of manage that as teams? Offenses now, all they're trying to do is manipulate what personnel is on the field on defense, right? So how do they answer that? Like, will they go to base if a team throws a couple tight ends out there? Do they try to stay in nickel? How should Giant fans expect to see the Giants maybe adjust that on the defensive side of the ball?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on how guys cover. Like that Titans had when in Frank's first year, Dennard's first year here, Kenneth Murray was their inside backer who was on the field a lot during nickel, and he got exposed a little bit in coverage, and certainly maybe that affected their thinking. It certainly affected their thinking from a personnel standpoint because Kenneth Murray then was shipped out of here, and then they went out and got Cody Barton in free agency, and they retooled some things. I think, again, the league's gotten so much away from just guys that are in base. I think you're going to see one guy do the majority of that stuff, and then you're going to have a lot of DBs playing.
Do they like bigger ends, or do they like kind of those smaller, are we going to see a bunch of like 6'5", 265 defensive, ends and edge players? Or are we going to see more like that 245-pound speed rusher?
Well, that's a good question because, and I don't know whether the GM or the head coach or the DC is going to decide that, but because they've done it two different ways here. Like when Dennard Wilson's first year here, the GM was Rand Carthon, and they were lighter on the outside, and I take that back. That was Berganzi's first year. They were lighter on the outside, and then they made a concerted effort to get bigger. Last year they were bigger. That was the whole offseason theme, is to beef up, get your Draymond Jones types, get your bigger, bigger, sturdier edge rushers, and I think that was, but I think that was more GM driven than coach driven.
How's the run defense been?
That was last year. I would say that was the switch from Carthon to Berganzi. So Berganzi's mindset was to get bigger and thicker on the edge, and that's what they ended up doing. And Dennard and those defensive coaches made it work.
Before I jump over to offense, and we'll get to Brian Callahan, how's the Titans' run defense been the last couple of years, Jim? The Giants have not been able to stop the run for like 3 years now, and it's kind of driving the fan base batty. So I think they'd love to hear that Dennard Wilson is going to show up here and fix the run defense a little bit.
Well, it's certainly what they want to do. You got to have the personnel to do it, but that's what they preached is for no one to be able to run on us, and that I can't sit here and tell you that always happened because. There was a game against Jonathan Taylor last year. A lot of people have tough days against Jonathan Taylor, but there have been a lot of games where the defense was questioning why it wasn't better against the run, and some of it was, is it the scheme? Is it the players? Is it guys missing assignments? Is it missed tackling? I think it's a combination of a lot of different things, but. It's something that they needed to get better at here.
All right, let's jump to the offensive side of the ball. Brian Callahan's interesting, right? He was the OC before he got to you guys as head coach, but never called plays. Then he called plays for you guys as the head coach. What are his general basic philosophies, especially in terms of the pass game? He's a Giants quarterback coach and pass game coordinator. Is it McVay-ish, given where he was in Cincinnati? What are some of the core values that Brian Callahan has as an offensive thinker?
Yeah, I think to some degree, I think that's maybe a good thought on what things could look like. It was hard to really know what he wanted to look like here because he could never really get it sorted with the quarterback spot. That's what Brian came here and was the choice as the head coach a couple of years ago because of his offensive mind, because of the success he had in Cincinnati, because of the quarterbacks that he had coached before, whether it was Peyton Manning or Matt Stafford or Joe Burrow. But then he came here and and couldn't really get off the ground because, of some turnover issues and injury issues around Will Levis. A year ago, he's dealing with a rookie quarterback who was kind of finding his way. So we really didn't ever get a feel of what it should look like because he couldn't really ever get anything settled down at the QB position. But they obviously want to be able to mix the run with the pass some. Like, I think when Brian Callahan came here, everybody thought, well, this is going to be a high-flying passing offense. There's still a big part of that philosophy is you got to be able to run the football and establish the run to open up the pass. And they tried to do that, just didn't do that well enough a lot of weeks.
What's your sense? Does he want the offense to be very vertical? Is it more of a horizontal pass game, a lot of deep balls, more of a conservative kind of, move the ball and matriculate at his own pace down the field? How much does he try to really kind of push the ball downfield and make explosive plays?
Yeah, perfect world, you want to hit some of those. Titans just never really had burners that could do it. But if you've got somebody who can open it up, yeah, you take your shots. But then he also, especially if you're dealing with a young quarterback who's still developing, like Jackson Dart. I mean, you're going to want to give him as much as he can take, and I think you're still going to want to again try to be able to run the football, but you got to take some shots downfield to open it up.
No, absolutely right. I think you're right. Anything else about Callahan you think Giant fans should know, Jim, in terms of his offensive philosophies, what he thinks about how he handles quarterbacks, trying to develop Jackson Dart that you picked up in his, little bit over a year with you guys?
Well, he's smart and he's even keel and I don't want to say he doesn't get rattled because there were a couple of highlight reels where he was chewing out his quarterback when he would get frustrated. But I mentioned some of the guys he's worked with in the past, and that includes Burrow, and that includes Peyton, and that includes Stafford. And I've talked to several of those guys and other people that are around him that just have raved about his patience and raved about his scheme and raved about his ability to scheme guys open. We didn't see that as much here. Just I think Brian we'll say he got sidetracked, but the job of a head coach when you're trying to call plays at the same time is hard. Like he had so many other things pulling at him that he just couldn't put his entire focus on the offense. And there were times over the last couple of years where things didn't go real well. And then obviously he gave up play calling at the early part of last season. I don't think he really wanted to do that. I think he did that reluctantly, but I think it was something that people felt like he needed to do to focus more on being a head coach. I think now that he's back into the coordinator spot and doesn't have all this other stuff slowing him down, all these meetings and people coming to his office for different things. I mean, he can go back to just being a football coach again. And I think that's going to benefit him well. I think it'll benefit the Giants well. And I think you'll see him have more success again.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing it. How just real quick, Jim, before we say goodbye, how excited is the fan base about Cam Ward? Are hopes still sky high for him, giving some of the flashes of brilliance we saw last year?
I think so. I mean, I think with Cam early on last year, it was a struggle, and I think he made some mistakes, and he probably humbled a little bit just because he's a guy that has so much confidence. And then I think once he settled down, I think he gave people reasons to be more optimistic. He was much cleaner with the football in the second half of the year. He made a lot better decisions. He was more accurate with the football. You could tell he was getting more comfortable. I think what gives people hope now is that he has a staff around him that has some experience, whether it's Brian Dable, who I know people are very familiar with there, or a lot of the guys in the offensive staff that have experience now. They just got to be better around him. It's one thing to be a rookie quarterback in the league. It's another thing to be a rookie quarterback in the league when you're throwing to other rookies. And that's what he was doing last year. So they've got to get more veterans around him. They got to protect him better. He got hit way too much, sacked way too much. Lucky he didn't get hurt before he did, which was the last game of the year. Now the focus is on rehabbing him, getting him right, and getting him up to speed with a new offensive coordinator. And but yeah, I think he gave people reason to be optimistic based on how he finished the season.
And then finally, we're trying to figure out what these teams ahead of the Giants are going to do in the draft, Jim. And obviously, your needs can change based on free agency and all that sort of stuff. I get that. But what do you think right now are some of the biggest needs that the Titans are going to look to fill in the offseason this year, whether it's free agency or the draft?
I think edge rusher, receiver, cornerback are top three, and what they do in the draft, I think, in a lot of ways could be determined on what happens in free agency.
Sure.
But this team needs some more speed at the receiver position. It needs veterans at the receiver position. This team has got to be better rushing the quarterback, especially coming off the edge. They've got some guys who can do it up the middle, and I mentioned Jeffrey Simmons, but edge rushers, this team's really lacking, and that's got to be it. And then the cornerback, again, is just completely depleted last year, who they had playing, and some of it's because they dealt guys away, some of it because guys were hurt, but that's right. When I look at this draft, there are several intriguing players, but I think this team also has about $100 million in cap room. And so maybe you attack certain things in March that changes your thought process in April.
Well, it is a deep draft class in both wide receiver and edge players, Jim. So it sounds like the needs do match the class. So best of luck, my friend. I really appreciate the time, and I look forward to seeing Indy. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Yeah, and enjoy those guys up there. All of them that you mentioned, from Frank Bush to Dennard Wilson to Brian Callahan, all super top-notch guys. So hope they do well.
Yeah, and we still have Charlie Bullen too, from here as well, who got held over. So appreciate the time, Jim. Enjoy the rest of your offseason, my friend. See you next week.
Okay, appreciate it.
All right, we thank our guest today for joining us, giving some more valuable insight into the Giants coaching staff with the focus on their coordinators and other higher level assistants here on John Harbaugh's staff in New York. For our guest, I am John Schmelk. Don't forget, you're watching and listening to the Giants Huddle podcast, brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants, coming to you from the Hackensack Meridian Health Podcast Studio. Keep getting better. We'll see you next time, everybody.